And good morning, Renee and Holly.
Good
Good morning.
morning.
Gotcha. All right, I can see your screen. Thank you.
Super. So we're ready to go.
You are. Take
Okay.
take it away.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So this is Holly speaking, and I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us. We've been working hard on this presentation and excited that we're here sitting with you virtually. Wish that we could see you in person, but this will do. I just wanted to take a minute to thank Louise and Rails for putting this together, for hosting us. We're really honored to be the last speakers in this series of webinars. In relation to the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. I know at Skokie we celebrated a little bit late in October. We had a number of really fantastic programs, and one of them that stuck out to me was when we had hosted Leonard Davis, who is a UIC professor and an author of a book called Enabling Acts. Then the subtitle is The Hidden Story of How the ADA Gave the Largest U.S. Minority Its Rights. He tells a really fantastic story about the bipartisan cooperation that was required to have the ADA pass. And in his book, he says, disability isn't in the person as much as it is in society. And I really like that quote because it really speaks to me, and I think Renee as well, that it was years ago in our respective libraries. I've been at Skokie the whole time, and Renee's worked at a bunch, where we realized that there was a barrier keeping families of children with disabilities away from the library. And we wanted to change that and become more welcoming and more inclusive. So when I think about the ADA, the first thing that comes to my mind is, oh, that's when everybody had to put ramps in and make sure that there was physical access to buildings. But obviously, we know it's so much more than that. And I think a good philosophy to consider and that I'm learning more about is the universal design. And that'll come up in our presentation a bit, and I think you'll see more of it in the near future. But universal design is a philosophy that considers the broad range of people's abilities and ages, their reading levels and learning styles, languages and cultures, considers the whole person prior to implementing a program or a service. It's at the design stage that we consider these things so that when we're looking at a space, a program, or a service, we're designing it in a way where everybody feels welcomed, where people can access our facilities and maneuver within them, that they can use our equipment and software, and they're fully able to benefit from materials and services. So there's a lot of thinking that goes into this beforehand, and so I'm excited about learning more about universal design and stepping back and considering people's needs. And yeah, it kind of seems like being all things to all people, but why not? We're libraries. That being said, I just want to make a little disclaimer here that you may have noticed in our description, Renee and I said that we were leaders in the field, not experts. We don't have backgrounds in special education, and we certainly don't have all the answers, but what we do have is a bit of experience, mostly in partnership with the experts, from whom we've learned a whole lot, and our passion has grown to see children of all abilities enjoy their public libraries. So we hope that this webinar inspires you to use your personal librarian strengths to serve youth with disabilities, and you're here. This is, if I had to guess, probably not your first training. So if you just continue bringing the things that you're learning and your love for children and a little bit of courage to step outside your comfort zone, and I know that as librarians together, we're really going to continue to make a difference in the lives of children with disabilities.
Thanks, Holly. This is Renee Grassi here, and I also want to say thank you all for joining us today. Let's just go over briefly what we're going to be talking about today. This webinar is about creating a welcoming library environment for our youngest members, children through young adults. And really, though, the truth is that there really isn't one size-fits-all solution to library accessibility. Accessible and inclusive outreach and services to the library community really should be different in each of our libraries because our communities are different, and that's okay. We hope after this morning's presentation you guys will come away with at least one idea that you can tailor to your own community's needs. So we'll cover a lot of ground. We will talk about knowing and assessing your community. We'll talk about disability-friendly customer service, assistive technologies, accessible collections, programs, models of service, as well as a variety of program ideas to bring to your community for a wide variety of age groups. We will, Holly and I will be showcasing a lot of what we've done at our own libraries, but we will also be sharing what our colleagues have done throughout the Chicagoland area. And this is no way an exhaustive list of what we can do at our libraries to serve children and young adults with disabilities. There really are a variety of ways we can learn to serve, and it's important to learn about them all so we can determine what works best for our community. So let's get started by finding out where you guys are all from. This is our first poll today. We really just want to know where the library is, where your work is located. Are you from the Chicagoland area? Are you from another part of the library or another part of Illinois? Maybe you're outside of Illinois from another state, or maybe you're outside of the country. So if Louise, you could make the poll live, and we will wait to hear from you.
Sure, the poll is live. Can you see that on your screen? Maybe not. Okay,
I
sorry
can.
about that. Okay,
That's okay.
I'm going to give it about 10 more seconds. All
And
right.
thank you again to Rails for hosting. This is such a great opportunity, and so thank you, Rails.
Okay. Oh, you're welcome. We're glad to have you. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. Can you see the results, Renee or Holly?
Yes, I
Okay.
got them. It looks
Okay.
like the large majority of us are in the Chicagoland area, which is super exciting because as we talk about Snails, we hope to recruit more members. And for those of you who are in another part of Illinois, we're reaching and stretching through conferences, the upcoming youth symposium. We'd really like to continue to meet with you and network and learn what you're doing. And those of you outside the state, welcome, welcome, welcome. I know there's amazing things happening around the country. And if possible, you find that Snails is a good idea. I think we haven't quite gotten into that yet, but it's our networking group, and we're hoping to really see this love for serving kids with disabilities just spread throughout where there's a lot of idea sharing going on. And I have to say, we were hoping our friend in Australia was logging in, but it is 2 o'clock in the morning her time, so she's probably still sleeping. But thank you all for being here from all locations. So I had mentioned Snails, and we'll go back to our slides. This is a group that Renee and I have the pleasure of co-facilitating. And there are a lot of networking groups in Illinois. There's some just to talk about story times or programming, book discussions. In the past, there was a group for that where we can just come together and learn from each other. So Renee and I thought, let's get a bunch of people together, and we're so excited by the 40 or so libraries who have expressed interest in Snails. Snails stands for Special Needs and Inclusive Library Services. And everybody in Snails is passionately committed to inclusivity and making a positive impact on the lives of all children. Our group is made up of Illinois Youth Services librarians and other staff, young adult librarians, some adult services librarians have joined us because they found that they've learned a lot from our meetings. We also welcome students in LTA and MLS programs to our meetings. We meet on a quarterly basis at libraries around the Chicagoland area. And each of our meetings is a forum to exchange ideas, to learn, to advocate for one another and inspire one another. Each meeting starts out with just some hellos, a meet and greet, and then we often have a guest speaker. And what I love about the Chicago area is that there's just so many fantastic community partners who are willing to come in and talk about accessible play, learning disabilities, adapted books. We've had speakers also from, let's see, Renee, you can jump in if you think of one. Theraplay, which is a really great organization. So we're learning about kids with disabilities, and we're learning to take tools into our programming and also meeting partners that we may partner with to provide programs or services in our libraries. After we share some professional development, we go around and kind of a round robin idea sharing time so that we can support one another's new initiatives and answer questions, those difficult questions about marketing. How do you get an audience? What do you do when there's only 3 people that show up and your manager is hoping for bigger numbers? And then we always give the host library a chance to really shine and show their stuff, what they're doing. And it's been really, really just energizing and inspiring to see what people are doing around the Chicagoland area. We also have a blog, which you'll see the URL right there on the screen, that features guest blog posts from our members, and we would love to have anybody in the audience today send us their story that we can post. We also put a lot of information about upcoming training opportunities in the Chicago area, and as best we can, we try to post notes or videos from our meetings. So there's a lot of information there, as well as a resources page for further reading and viewing. So we just wanted to say that we realize we're better together. Librarians are stronger together, and we encourage you to come join us at Snails and maybe even start a Snails group in your area. So it's important to know a little bit about our audience as we continue, and that brings us to poll number 2, which is knowing a bit about you. Where is your library at in terms of serving youth and teens with disabilities? Are you just starting out and this is maybe the first webinar you're at, or you're just trying a little bit of programming or partnership? Maybe you have a bit going on and you're looking to do some more or refine your skills, or going steady and keeping your eyes out for new ideas. You can go ahead and vote, and I know you might not fit in any of these 3 categories, but we just want to get a feel for what you've been doing.
All right, the poll is launched. We've got about 75% voting. I'm going to give it maybe 10 more seconds. All right. All right, looks good. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and show you the results. There you go.
This is great. Well, congratulations to everybody, especially that 45%. We know that it's a little bit, maybe we're a little nervous at first, not knowing that how our skills will transfer over to working with kids with disabilities, or if we have to be professionals, or what will happen if there's a difficult situation. And I just want to assure you that you're entering into an incredibly just heartfelt area of service. It's become a passion of mine, and one of the things I like to say is that what special needs programming and services sometimes lacks in numbers, it more than makes up for in heart and impact. So I'm just so excited that your library is going to be more inclusive, and those who have a bit going on, we want to hear from you. We want to see it on our Snails blog. We want to share it with the world, and I do mean the world, because we have people visiting our website from different countries. What are you doing? And also those of us going steady and keeping our eyes out for new ideas. That's the truth, right? We never want to become stale. We always want to be thinking fresh and finding out what we can do specifically for our patrons' needs. So we'll move on from there and throw it back to Renee for a little bit of intro on the disabilities community.
Thanks, Holly. So it's so great to see so much great stuff going on throughout the country, really. Whether you're starting out brand new and you haven't done any of this before, or you've been doing this for a while, it's really always good to take a look at the statistics and evaluate how they've changed over time. There really has been some dramatic change, especially within the last several years. So if your library hasn't developed programs or services to people with disabilities before, there's no better time to start than now. Public libraries are institutions for all, and regardless of the type of library you work at, school, public, small or large, urban or rural, all of the library communities serve people with disabilities. So there are a variety of numerics that I think it's important to consider when researching statistics in your own disability community. A lot of the statistics that I'm going to go over are more national, so it's important to look at some of your local statistics. So whether that's reaching out to your local special education district and finding out how many students in your community have a disability, that might be a great resource for you. But first, according to the 2010 U.S. Census, 1 in 20 school-aged children in the United States have a disability. Now, that's a national average, but it's also a very telling statistic. There are also some interesting statistics regarding developmental disabilities as well. The latest research by the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the National Center for Health statistics show that the prevalence of autism spectrum disorder, for example, in children ages 3 to 17 is 1 in 45. I think with regards to the last several years, I mean, even in 2011, as you can see from the graph, it was 1 in 80. Now diagnoses are 1 in 45. This means that 2% of children in the U.S. have been diagnosed with autism, and the CDC has come out by saying that they feel this is a more accurate representation of autism in the United States. So you may not be necessarily seeing patrons with disabilities come into your library, but these statistics are important to show that they definitely are there in your community. And later we'll share ideas about programs and services to develop to reach out to these families if they are not coming into your library. But of course, as children get older, as they do, it's important to look at some of the statistics about students as they graduate into high school. Actually, nearly about 40% of students with disabilities do not graduate high school. Graduation rates really vary dramatically across the country, with rates ranging as high as 80% to as low as 22%. And if we look at the unemployment rate, so this is beyond people ages 22 and older, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, unemployment rates are higher, dramatically higher, for persons with a disability than those without a disability. And in 2014 alone, only 17.1% of persons with disability were employed. So how does this impact the library? I mean, even if you think about story time, if your story time has 20 children attending, chances are one of those children may have a disability. And if at least 5% of people have a disability, we want to make sure that the services we provide, the customer service we provide, is disability friendly. And we are aware of the disability community. So before we talk about disability-friendly customer service, a couple of things to remember. Really, at the heart of it, these are tenets of just basic, excellent customer service. And another thing that I always like to talk about is that really I feel our role as librarians is to serve and make sure that we are meeting the needs of our patrons. It's really not to diagnose or to try and figure out what a person's disability is. True, there may be visible disabilities that we might be more apt to see, but then there might be invisible disabilities. Something like autism spectrum disorder is not necessarily something that you can see have a person having characteristics, physical characteristics, when they come into the library. So that's just something to remember. And if you know one person with disability, chances are you know one person with disabilities. And that's just to say that everyone is different, whether they have disabilities or not. So while these are just some general guidelines for customer service, it's really important to remember that there really isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. But what are some things that you can do to adjust your own customer service to try and be more disability friendly? And we have an image here of jjslist.com and their disability aware business logo. JJ's List is actually an organization that goes out to companies, businesses, and libraries to provide disability aware training. We recently brought them actually to the Glen Ellen Public Library for an all-staff training day. So if you are in the Chicagoland area, which many of you are, this is a great resource to check out if you want to bring in training at your library. But really, I think it's first and foremost, it's about getting to know your patrons. At the most basic level, getting to know their names, their likes, their dislikes, and I think this will really help with relationship building and trust. And of course, be sure to listen to what it is they are interested in and their feedback. Another thing that's important to consider is person-first language, and this is discussed in the disability-aware training through JJ's List. Basically, what person-first language is language that puts the person first. So instead of, for an example, instead of saying the autistic person, person-first language changes that to saying the person with autism. And I do want to mention too, if you're talking about someone who uses a wheelchair, instead of saying someone is wheelchair bound, you would say the person uses a wheelchair. In fact, that wheelchair helps them get around. It actually helps them be mobile, so they're not bound to a wheelchair. This is some of the tips and strategies that might come up in the disability awareness training through JJ's List. But it is important to remember that some people with disabilities do self-identify. So there is a portion of the disability community that feels very strongly that the language used to describe them is identity first. So some people describe themselves as autistic, and they take pride in that. So that's just something to be aware of in terms of our own language. Speaking directly to the person and not the caregiver, I think, is a great tip. I will admit that this can sometimes be hard, for example, if a person is nonverbal and you're struggling with knowing how to communicate with them. We have ideas for that later on, but also especially when you're noticing the caregiver is speaking for the person. I think it's always a good tip to circle back and redirect inquiries and comments to the person. And then adjusting your delivery. Being less verbose, and I will be the first to admit this is challenging for me, and it was challenging for me when I was learning how to do sensory story time. I think we as librarians are always used to giving more information, all of the information about all of the things, and sometimes that's not always the best approach. So really being clear and offering choices and being direct. So for example, saying something like, we don't have Superman books today. Would you like Batman or Spider-Man? So giving some choices, allowing time to process, even maybe asking a person to write down their question if you're having difficulty understanding their language or speech. And then we want to talk a little bit about utilizing visual supports. There's a variety of ways you can utilize visual supports in your library, whether that includes large signage, maybe Dewey Decimal icons. You can offer choice boards, which is what you see on the image to the right here. And choice boards really make visuals available to help kids, whether they're nonverbal, they can point to an object or point to a picture of something that they want. And it really helps with kids that are even shy. So this gets back to the universal design. Something like a choice board is not just great for kids with disabilities. If someone is shy and maybe is having difficulty with the confidence of asking you a question, you can offer them a choice board and ask, what would you like to read today? On the left, you'll see an image of a social story, and social stories are used in the special needs community to teach and introduce concepts using pictures and text written in the first person, especially experiences and concepts that are new and different to somebody. So for example, if someone's never visited your library building before, having a "This is my library" social story will be able to walk them through the experience of visiting your library, and with the text being able to experience what that visit would be like without even having to deal with the anxiety of maybe walking through your doors. So this would help promote not only knowledge of the library, but also build confidence. And since we are talking about ADA today, I think it's really important for us as librarians to have a general knowledge of ADA policy and your library's own policies and procedures with regards to ADA. But remember, it's important to have an awareness and know that we should handle situations on a case-by-case basis. So for example, we at the Glen Ellen Public Library have a great rapport with an adult with developmental disabilities. And this individual really enjoys signing up for our library summer reading program in our youth department, as well as our Patch Club. She's very excited about the program. It gets her to read. She talks to us about the books that she reads, but the program itself is not necessarily designed for an adult, but we make that exception, that accommodation, to allow her to sign up. Again, it's about relationship building and getting to know your members. That will really help in the long run. But it's also about maintaining ADA compliance. And I think with respect to three really important areas, employment, building, and your website. So with regard to ADA compliance for employment, it's important to remember the ADA Act of 1990 makes it unlawful for us to discriminate employment against a qualified individual with disabilities. With regards to building compliance, ADA standards for accessible design and building compliance should be maintained throughout. But I think sometimes it's important to think beyond ADA and think about flexibility in design. We are recently going through a remodel of our youth department at the Glen Ellen Public Library. So it's an opportunity for us to really look at the space and rethink and design it with flexibility in mind, maybe consider flexible layout for us to be able to do multiple things with the layout that we have, even having something like mobile displays that will that allow us to move things in and out of the library as we need them. And then with regards to your website, making sure that your website is accessible and compatible and compliant with Section 508 compliance for people with disabilities. All right, and I think we're going to move on to Holly to talk about assistive technology.
Okay, thanks, Renee, for that great overview. So yeah, we do want to stick along with the theme of ADA, and again, thinking universal design. I had mentioned before when the ADA was passed, a lot of us would think, okay, that's when everybody had to put ramps in or were grandfathered in and didn't have to make those changes. And another example is the curb cuts, that prior to curb cuts, it was nearly impossible for somebody in a wheelchair or with crutches to really make their way around the neighborhood. They would be really confined to their own block. But those curb cuts didn't just help people in wheelchairs, it helped parents with strollers and other people at different times of their life. So again, we're thinking about designing our areas with a variety of abilities and ages and reading levels and learning styles in mind. And so with that, I want to move from the ADA required website accessibility to some suggested assistive technology benchmarks. And what we have here is the EDGE initiative, which is still kind of young. It started up by the Urban Libraries Council and is supported by a number of other organizations such as ALA and PLA, some strong universities. And what they've done is put together some benchmarks, and you can go to the EDGE website, libraryedge.org, and even use the assessment tool to see where you are at in terms of growing and developing your public technology services. The EDGE helps us to make strategic decisions and identify areas that need improvement. And really the behind all of this is the vision that all people should have opportunities to enrich and improve their lives through open access to information, communication, and the area we'll focus on now is technology services offered by public libraries. So I'm going to highlight just one specific benchmark. That's number 11. You can read it there, that this is about inclusiveness for digital technology as it relates to people with disabilities. And again, these are benchmarks, so it's a recommendation in thinking about like similar to an ADA compliance. What is the least that we should have? But at the same time, you can't necessarily go out and buy a whole lot of expensive equipment if it's not going to be used. So that kind of goes back to getting to know your community and seeing what the need is there. The first recommendation is that you consider people with visual impairments by having at least one computer with something like a screen reader so that they can hear the screen read aloud, magnification so that a book can be placed perhaps under a magnifier and that they can see that larger. And that's not helpful just for people with visual impairments, but also children who have learning disabilities, such as dyslexia. I think it defines the reading disabilities, and making that text larger is really going to help. So if you have this equipment already and you're thinking, oh, it's not being used that much by senior citizens or people with visual impairments, maybe get in touch with the special education coordinators at your schools and see if it wouldn't help them. If you're not able to have all this equipment, at least that way you're also finding out who could use it. You know, we're in the middle of reconsidering our ADA technology room where we have so much as a braille printer or embosser. So these things aren't all required, but take a look at the list, maybe just a high contrast keyboard so it's easier to find the keys and whatever we might need for somebody with visual impairments, but at least one public terminal would be there. And then consider those who don't have the fine motor skills or dexterity that others do. Touch screens are becoming more popular, so you may already have something and didn't even realize that you were serving those with disabilities. A trackball is a substitution for a mouse and is just easier on the wrist and doesn't require as much fine motor skills. And then switches are a simple button, which you'll see a picture of later. It's actually possible to navigate the computer with a cursor that moves across the screen, and all somebody would have to do is push one button and not really have to move the mouse at all. And then, of course, voice recognition software. So you can continue to look through this list, keeping in mind that we want a place where somebody in a wheelchair can come up close. And then what I really loved about the EDGE initiative is the recommendation that you put some of this information into strategic plans and staff training. And that's why you're here. So what do you already have in your library? Accessible operating systems. iOS, Apple is just great at providing built-in accessibility. I recently, somewhat accidentally, updated my computer to Windows 10 the other day and was really pleased to see that so one can quickly navigate to the settings to turn on the screen narration, to get an on-screen keyboard so that one can either, if it's a touch screen, just touch that keyboard or using a mouse or whatnot, or even something as simple as high contrasting colors so it's easier to read what's on the screen. And I know that Apple is really working in conjunction with Braille readers as well. So really proud of them and just impressed by what they're doing. And it's not just the operating systems, but once somebody gets online, there are some children, I'm thinking of a few kids here at Skokie, who once they're in front of the computer, it's really hard to redirect them. And with a little bit less self-control, difficult to keep them at the task at hand. So there is a web browser called Zack Browser, which is completely free. It was designed by a father of a child with autism who wanted to give his son a safe place to browse from website to website without finding himself on something inappropriate or maybe even spending too long on YouTube. So this screen that you see on the right is his menu of options. They're divided into groups such as music websites, games, reading, and things like that. You can just download it and try it out yourself and then see if that would be helpful to put onto your internet-based computers. And then I probably don't have to say too much about the iPad, but really tablet technology is revolutionizing the way that children with disabilities learn and communicate. We had a little girl in one of our programs called Club Wonder who has speech apraxia and did not speak, and after offering a workshop on iPads, her mom went out and bought one and all the apps that were recommended by the therapist who joined us, and she says, I had no idea how much my daughter knew until she could show us. And Tamara Caldor, a therapist in the area, loves to tell this story about how there was a parent that just about cried seeing her daughter using Toca Boca Tea Party to have her very first tea party at something like 5 or 6 years old because she wasn't able to participate in the actual physical teacups, but she could certainly tap the screen and even have the joy of spilling over the tea and wiping it up. So really it's changing the way that children are able to learn, to communicate, and to play. There's a couple other apps that I love. Cookie Doodle is one that's popular and really great for learning the steps in baking. And there's some other special needs apps that could be useful for you in story time that will help make a visual schedule so that the children know the components of your story time and they can anticipate what comes next. Is it going to be another book or a rhyme? Do they have to prepare themselves for songs and plug their ears? And that app that is most often recommended is called ChoiceWorks. And I will list these in an additional handout that we post later and email with the follow-up to our webinar. But I would love also, I wish that there was a chat feature here so that we can hear what other people are using. But if you would like just a one-stop shop to see what's going on, I've listed friendshipcircle.com here where you can read reviews of special needs apps. So moving on in technology, I'm thinking again, universal design, what can we have available for children before they even get to the library? And I'm going to do this a little bit out of order, but I would say these switch-activated and electronic toys, you'll see that little puppy there. That's the switch I was talking about, a single one-button switch. It just has one kind of circuit, if you will. It's on-off, or in the case of using it with a computer, it's like a mouse click. These switches are not terribly expensive, but the toys that you plug into them can be anywhere from $40 to hundreds of dollars at special needs resource stores online. And so I just wanted to make a quick note to say that any toy you have that you think a child would like to play with, where they can't get the on-off switch by themselves, or they don't have the dexterity to move that little puppy along the table, or they don't have the voice to say woof woof, you can take that toy. It could even be a boombox or a radio. If it's got an on-off switch, you can purchase a $10 battery interrupter and put one side of the battery interrupter right next to the battery. It's a thin wire, so you can close the battery door, and then you'll have that 3.5 millimeter jack on the other side that connects into the switch. And there's actually some directions on Instructables.com for making your own battery interrupter, so you wouldn't even have to buy one. But and then I was thinking, I'm not a science person, but I wonder if you can make a switch using Makeys. That would be awesome. You can have a full accessibility STEM program where people are actually creating the resources that you can use with patrons, right? So for like friends helping friends or patrons helping patrons. The pictures up at the little squares at the top are record or replay buttons, and these might be going a little bit out of style because the iPad can do so much, but I really like to have them. They're just little voice recorders, and I think they're really helpful for kids who are nonverbal to help them participate in the refrain of a story, or to make choices if you wanted to ask what color mitten they would put on the board, or even for a child who needed to hear the directions to the craft more than one time. You can say it once and record it in the voice box, and then the child can hit the replay button as needed. And again, these are things that you can just put out. You can plan for them when you know you have children with special needs coming, or you can put them out in the open for people to discover. And then at the very bottom, you've got some strange little things that almost look like pliers there. Those are adapted scissors. It's much easier to open and close those scissors without having to put a thumb and use the opposable thumb. They make it a little bit easier. They're still only for righties, though. I haven't seen adapted scissors for lefties. But we have things such as this and easy grip crayons. We think about young children, and we always order those large Crayola crayons, but there are other crayons that are more like bulbous at the end or shaped as a triangle or a pyramid that is easier to hold on to. And then speaking of holding on to things, how about just providing a tray for children to do crafts? And if you have a craft room, that's something you can try now. It's like, here's a tray to hold your items so that they're not falling off the table. So again, just things that we can do for all of our learners, all of our users. We're just trying to think of different learning styles, different abilities in mind, and we're not necessarily spending tons of money, but looking at what's available to us to create that inclusive space and really make the library accessible. So far we've talked about strategies for customer service and assistive technology that make our place more welcoming. And like Renee said, our services and programs are going to look different at every library, and they should, because every library has its unique patrons, staff, and staff expertise, different resources in terms of money or just the space or what's already in your storytime room or in your teen area. And my most favorite is you have different partners in your area, and some may have to reach a little bit farther than others, but I would say nothing I do I came up with on my own, and most of the programs we offer are in partnership. Not only does it help us offer a better program, but it helps market the services as well. So while we want to make sure that we are hitting universal design benchmarks for our building and basic technology, when it comes to collection and programming, we want to make sure that our offerings really do reflect the needs of our patrons, and that's why it's important to perform some sort of community assessment. Not only does it help you get an idea for what interests them, but you're also by nature promoting that the library is an inclusive place that's interested in serving their families and really getting them involved in the process. After all, this is their library. So how do you gather this information? Well, you can certainly invite people in for community conversations, and that's why the partnerships come back again. Talk with your special education teachers, get in touch with some of the therapy organizations or a special recreation association, maybe even a hospital. Their Easter Seals. There are lots and lots of people in the community who are just as passionate as you and can really help talk about some of the needs that you can meet in your library. You can, of course, do a survey, and I know Renee and I have both used SurveyMonkey or paper surveys distributed through the schools or during programs or family tours to really get a lot of information about our community. Of course, you can just have informal conversations as well. So what do you need to know? I like to find out the ages of the children in our area. I especially like getting the ages first up because you can then group your findings. And just to give you an example, something that I found is when I ask about what type of program people prefer, and by type I mean would the parents want to bring children to a program that's designed specifically for kids with disabilities, or would they want them to come to just our general program without any sort of accommodations, or is there some area in the middle that's inclusive and sensitive to their needs? And I was pretty surprised when I saw it was evenly split throughout. The little bit heavier a little heavier population wanted the programs just for kids with disabilities. And I could look at my survey and say, okay, well, is this everyone, or is this have something to do with age? And in my case, I can see that there are a fair number of the younger families who I think just feel more comfortable getting started in a program that's designed just for them, although that I wouldn't say is the case all the time, and we'll share an example later. So it is important to get their ages and find out what type of program they would like to be in, as well as the topics of programs. So are they interested in social groups? Would they like to see music? Is it more so of technology? Is it a reading club at their level? Throw out some ideas and find out what they might be interested in. And by the way, at the same time, you also might ask them about the services they are already using, and that would help you make decisions on whether you need to retire resources that you have. We have a special needs collection that doesn't check out that well, and I like to use the surveys to both express or promote the special needs collection of high-low books, and also make some decisions on whether or not it would be needed. If I ask people, would you use this, and most people say, no, not really, then I know I've got something sitting on the shelf that's just taking up space. Another thing that you can do is ask for anecdotes and testimonials. We know that with advocacy is a really good story. And so ask somebody for a great experience that they had in your library, and likewise be very open to hearing what might not have gone well, because if you find out that somebody made an announcement using the word handicapped instead of disabilities, that offended someone, or a person was not given consideration for a longer extended loan, or to talk about their waived fines with their child who, tends to hide the movies that she loves best and just need a little bit more time to get that movie in. We just want to know where we're doing really well and where we're missing the mark, so that we can address that. And likewise, if you're asking for contact information, you can then get back to that person and say, thank you so much for sharing this information. I want you to know that we're making improvements, or if there's misinformation, you can clarify that. Another great reason for having communication or contact information is in the future, when you get new services going or you've changed something, you can contact them by sending a newsletter or giving them a call to ask if they'd like to serve on an advisory board. So there's just a lot of great information you can get from your community assessment. I would offer incentives if you can. Is there a chance to win a gift card or some waived fines or maybe some leftover summer reading prizes? And when you do have this information down, try to move with it really quick, share it with administration, try to ask if you can put it into the goals and objectives of the library's strategic plan so that you know you have support to get it done, and you also have accountability as well. So that is community assessments. And so what do you do with that information? We just need to check our order, right, Renee? We're going to move into accessible collections, I think.
Yep. Sorry about that, guys. We'll do the poll after.
Okay.
I think what Holly brings up is absolutely true. I mean, we really need to reach out to our members, especially if we're trying to serve families with kids with disabilities and they aren't coming to the library. We need to work hard to try and assess what their experiences are, what their needs are, and that information can inform so much. It can not only inform programming, which we'll talk about later, but it can inform collections. After all, we are libraries, and it's important to think about the collections that we have that are accessible to our members. So I have a variety of examples of accessible collections at your library. So first, there are those types of collections and formats that are inherently accessible to a variety of individuals and a variety of abilities. So whether someone has dyslexia or someone has a developmental disability, is blind or is deaf, collections like large type, audio, visual, ebooks, digital books, even sensory books are inherently accessible to a wide audience. But then there are other collections, library materials that address disability directly, such as parenting books on disability-related topics, maybe books that teach and promote acceptance and inclusion of the disability community. We can also have books that teach social skills. And then there are fiction materials that capture and mirror the disability experience. So for those of you that are familiar with, of course, Caldecott and Newbery, which will soon be announced later on in the next month or two, there's another award that's given annually through ALSC, and it's the Schneider Family Book Award. This is actually an award that awards material portraying the disability experience. So I'm always interested in seeing what type of juvenile material, and there's always 3 age groups awarded every year if there are materials worthy of the award that year. So I'm always interested in what books receive the Schneider Family Book Award each year. And then there's really a third category. That's those special collections that are specifically used by people with disabilities. So for example, at Glen Ellen, our early literacy librarian is in the process of developing a new special needs collection. And this will include books for and about people with disabilities. It will include books that are adapted, maybe with pages that are more easily turned, more pictures on the bottom that maybe relate to the images, the illustrations in the story. I know Skokie, Holly, you already mentioned your high-low books. High-low books are books that are written for an older age group, but written at a lower reading level. And highnoonbooks.com is one of many vendors out there that sells specifically high-low books. We also have examples of books in Braille, and I know both of our libraries, Skokie and Glen Ellen, have books in Braille. I do want to highlight the Disability and Kidlit blog. I think it's a great blog to discuss the portrayal of disabilities. And what's unique about this blog is that it is a blog that offers reviews about books that portray disability experience, but those reviews are written by people with disabilities. So these are people with authentic experience that really can speak to, again, the authenticity of the portrayal of that particular story. I do want to highlight one of our Snails libraries, Helen Plum Memorial Public Library in Lombard, Illinois. Youth librarian Kate Loveday is doing amazing things over at that library. And one of the things that she wanted to share with the group today is her collection of sensory strategy kits. And this is a collection of sensory-rich toys and materials that are available for checkout. And they focus on an emphasis of fine motor and gross motor skills, coordination and balance, tactile simulation, spatial logic, and social emotional skills. And we have uploaded one of the handouts that she was so generous to share with us today so that you guys can find out some more information about that. She also has created a bibliography of resources for children with special needs and the adults who care for them, and it highlights these kits as well as other books and materials that might be valuable to the population. So this is just another way of thinking about how your collections can serve the unique needs of children with disabilities and their families. And I think we probably need to go back to our poll now, don't we, Holly?
We can do it right after models of service.
All right, I'm going to
How
pass
about
it off
that?
to you.
Okay, so we've been talking about universal design and being as inclusive as possible, and sort of being prepared and thinking about everybody's diverse needs. And of course, I kind of laugh about saying being all things to all people, but there is some truth in it. We really do want to make everybody feel like this is their library, this is their home, and they're appreciated for who they are. So when it comes to designing your programs, and I'm so excited that we're getting to the program piece because I do love programs. Do you go for something that's more inclusive, or do you go with something that's more targeted? And this is, I think, again, going to be dependent on the library. At Skokie, we tend to do a lot of targeted programs because that's what we felt we were hearing from our surveys and what's been successful. And we're working more towards making our programs more inclusive. So there are pros and cons to both. Of course, when you have inclusive programs, you're really welcoming all. It's great. Everybody can come, families, siblings, all ages is really nice. It helps those who may be at a one age level chronologically, but at a different developmental level. And it's great to have drop-in programs if possible, like these open play groups, drop-in gaming, because it's sometimes difficult for people to commit to programs ahead of time. But at the same time, it can be difficult for the staff because if you have a large programming team, you'll want everybody to feel comfortable making accommodations. And speaking of accommodations, it would be important when offering inclusive programs on your program literature to make sure that you are providing a phone number and maybe even a contact person's name if people do need accommodations. They know under the ADA they can make a request for a reasonable accommodation, and what might be good for your library is to determine ahead of time what the advance notice needs to be. Is it 5 days? Is it a week? Is it longer if somebody needs a sign language interpreter? But do make sure that you are letting everybody know that the library is a place for all and you're willing to make accommodations. And then in terms of making accommodations, especially if you're at a small library, say another reason for like reaching out to the special education staff or therapists in your area is because there might be on occasion somebody who wants to attend that really needs more like a one-on-one aid. And if you've got some people that you can call in and say, can you come for this one program? Oh, does that make a difference where a child can attend a program independently? But it does take just more awareness of who might be coming and to kind of be ready for anything. Whereas the targeted programs, you would be planning these programs specifically geared towards children with disabilities, and maybe even taking into consideration the exact needs of a child. When we offer things such as sensory story time, or at my library we have something called Club Wonder or a therapy dog program, we do get information about the children as they register. We usually take that information and put it in a Google spreadsheet, and then I can refer to that. So when I'm making my lesson plans, I can think about how I could use that voice box or what app might be fun to use here. I can also share that information with a therapist who might be coming in to teach a class, and we're really customizing the programs. The targeted program, as I mentioned by our survey, is sometimes more popular for those families who have young children because the parents are, this diagnosis is new and the parents may feel some isolation and they're looking for a place where they could meet other families and others aren't looking at them because they're really just coming into this new realization and identity themselves. So the targeted programs are really, really helpful. Plus, I would have somebody from our therapy dog program who said, you know what, I don't want to have to call to make an accommodation. I want to know that this program's already designed with my child in mind. These are her peers. So it really just depends, on the families. I'd say try a little bit of everything, and there's a lot of ideas here. We're curious to know what things you might be doing. I know we realize that there are a lot of newcomers to the field, so we're excited, and there were also some people who were getting going. So let's do that survey that Renee had listed there about what age groups you might be serving already. I think it's this poll. Do you already have programs for the birth to 3 crowd or the 5, is it like 4 to 7 crowd? Do we have that survey? There we go. Yeah, so for what ages are you offering specialized programs for youth with disabilities?
And I do want to mention really quickly, again, another shout out about our Snails blog. We have a huge list of resources that include articles, blogs, books, and of course, our guest bloggers as well. But under our resources tab on the Snails blog, you'll find a variety of additional information with ideas for programs and services to make your libraries inclusive and accessible in terms of programming and services. So definitely check out our resources tab on the Snails blog.
All right, I'm going to give this is Louise. I'm going to give the poll about 10 more seconds. We've only had about 67% voting, but I'm going to go ahead and close it now and show you the results. There you go.
Holly, would you be able to go over them? I don't have access to that screen.
Sure. So it looks like we have about 32% of the participants that already have programs for ages birth to 2, and then 55% for ages 3 to 7, which is usually our sensory story time audience, 23% in ages 8 to 12, 26% of us, a quarter of us, are serving those teens, ages 13 to 18, and what I love to see is 23% people are already providing services or programs for the transitional age group from 18 to 22.
Fantastic. Oh, that's great. I also love the programming section of this presentation, mostly because I love highlighting what other libraries are doing. I'm constantly inspired, not only by what you do, Holly, but by what all the other libraries are doing around the Chicagoland area and in Illinois. So we're really going to be highlighting the best of the best ideas and programs around here. These are often Snails members, but other people that have volunteered information about what their libraries do. So first we thought we would talk about family programming, and I know Holly already talked about a little bit about family programming, but the benefit of family targeted programming is that all of the family can really attend together. Parents can be there to support and engage and connect with the child with disabilities as well as the siblings without disabilities. And I think that sometimes siblings without disabilities are overlooked. So the idea that the whole family can come to a program together and connect and really make memories at the library, that's a wonderful thing. So I wanted to talk first just briefly about a couple of ideas of family programs your library can offer. First comes to us from the Evanston Public Library. Jill Squirski, the community engagement librarian, actually had an adult caregiver from the community say, hey, I would love to help you guys create kind of a special needs or a disability resources fair. And together she collaborated with this member, with this patron, and launched their library's first special needs fair, which was an informational fair that partnered with local disability related agencies. And I think the great thing about a disability resource fair, it's a perfect place for a library to program. We are, the Center for Information, the community space, and it's really a low effort, high impact type of program. The Wilmette Public Library offers shortened stage performances, and they hire contracted performances to do an additional program for specifically an audience of children with special needs, and it requires advanced registration, and they limit to a low number of attendees in a more intimate and sensory-friendly environment. So sometimes those magicians or those jugglers, they might be willing to stay for an extra sensory-friendly stage performance just for a smaller audience where the kids with disabilities may be a little less overwhelmed and can really interact with the performer. Of course, we can offer workshops for parents, and I think a unique thing about Skokie is that they offer these workshops with childcare. So oftentimes we hear from parents, oh, I can't come because I don't have a babysitter, or I have to make arrangements for childcare. If we can provide opportunities for parents to have childcare at our facilities and then provide learning opportunities for the parents on disability-related topics, I think that's a great idea. I know the Northbrook Public Library has offered an autism-friendly library open house where they've actually opened the library early before hours and hosted an open house so that families with kids with disabilities can walk around the library, interact with staff. This is a safe, non-judgmental environment, you know, outside of the regular busyness of the library's regular hours. And I think that that's a wonderful idea. And you could do it, it could just be a special needs friendly library open house. It doesn't have to be specifically marketed to autism, but it could be for everybody with disabilities. And then I know at the Deerfield Public Library, this is something that we did when I was there. We offered sensitive family tours, providing individualized services and attention to families with kids with disabilities. And this really was a great opportunity for me to meet families with kids with disabilities, welcome them to the library, get to know them, again with relationship building, finding out a little bit about them, their likes, their dislikes, and being able to, you know, highlight different things around the library that might be of interest to the child. So if the child really loved dinosaur books, I could, you know that in advance and on the tour highlight exactly where those dinosaur books are. So these are just some ideas for family programs. Specifically, I wanted to go in depth more about this idea of sensory-friendly films, and some of you may have already heard of this idea. This comes to us really from the model of AMC Theater with their partnership with the Autism Society. The Deerfield Public Library has been offering sensory-friendly films, so this information comes to us from them, and sensory-friendly films really are making the movie-going experience more inclusive to a broader audience. So being able to relax and enjoy quality family time without worrying if someone will complain or be disturbed by noise and movement, you know, this is something that may not be an experience that families with kids with disabilities often have. So the library is a great place to offer a movie program. Many of our libraries may already offer movie programs. So marketing it as sensory friendly, where it's a climate of acceptance and understanding, where you know, there is no judgment, and kids with either autism or all disabilities are able to come to the library and watch the movie in a comfortable environment. The Deerfield Public Library offers movies. They most recently showed the Minions, and it's on Tuesday evenings, and it's shown simultaneously with a general screening of the film in another room. So I think that's a really great idea. And so for more information, check out AMC Theaters about the sensory-friendly film concept. The Arlington Heights Public Library is doing wonderful things. I'm not biased, or maybe I am because I do live in Arlington Heights, but they are doing wonderful things to serve kids with disabilities. One of the ideas that came to us from the librarian Maria at Arlington Heights is this idea of an early intervention play group. And Arlington Heights heard from a customer who recently had a child assessed with early intervention services, and they were so overwhelmed and grateful to have an opportunity to come to a library at a program like this with their child and engage with a speech language pathologist or a specialist. So this really is one of those ideas where it's a family type program. It's maybe more targeted for specific needs in mind for children who currently receive the services, for them to engage with different play stations, and then for the adults to be there supervising their children, but also to interact with the specialist on hand, ask advice, ask questions. There's books offered, toys, and whatnot. And I think that this is just another really great idea in terms of targeting specific program for a younger age group. And really, it's low cost, easy setup. You can use program supplies that you already have on hand, but then in terms of marketing and making a partnership with someone in your community that has that expertise, maybe that could either volunteer their time or you give them a small honorarium, I think that would be a great idea. And this is Sue Parsons from the Plainfield Public Library. She's been doing sensory storytime now for years. She is a Snails member. I'm not going to go too much in depth about sensory storytime here. It's possible that a lot of you are already doing sensory storytime, which is very commendable. But her sensory storytime is unique in that it really is an example of a truly inclusive program. Friends, siblings are welcome to come in this non-judgmental environment for storytime. We actually have a demo of Sue's sensory storytime on the Snails blog. blog, as well as Sensory Storytime YouTube video presentation led by myself and Sue, where we talk really in-depthly about sensory storytime. But basically, she offers visual supports, as you can see in her photo, free play, socializing, story times, and various sensory and tactile activities around the room. It's just a wonderful program, and she's had this program offered at her library for years now and is really seeing the benefits of, still trying to continue to find her audience, and she's since found her audience, so it's really wonderful. And you can just see in the picture, she just exudes with passion and a love of books and serving children. She's great, so I would definitely check out her video.
Yeah, I can second that. She also has a lovely voice, and in her video just has this being herself is this perfect approach, like calm but engaging. She talks about taking, a deep breath and just being ready and being present with the kids, and she really is able to connect with them, and it is a beautiful thing. So at Skokie Public Library, we offered sensory time for a few years, and then we had some feedback from one of our surveys that the parents would like to see some more music and art classes, and I thought, okay, I can stop and figure out how to do music and art classes in an adapted sort of way, or I can tap into some of those community partners and deepen our relationship and ask them to come on in and do a demonstration program. So I referred to this briefly before. This is the program that we have each month. A different therapist or musician is paid nothing to maybe $50 or $100. I'm asking them to do a demonstration class for the families, and again, I do take registration so I know who's coming and what their needs are. And what I love about this program is obviously it's giving a wider variety of experiences that I couldn't do on my own, but the beautiful thing is it's connecting parents to potential service providers in the area. They're able to try it out without signing up for, a 10-week program or even utilizing their insurance if that's applicable. They're able to meet the provider and learn a little bit about the philosophy behind that service and determine if they want to check it out. So you can see in this picture there's a lot going on, from music to iPads to yoga and sensory experiences like Play-Doh. I like to tell the story about the two little girls on the yoga mats. One it has speech apraxia and the other one doesn't stop talking, and they became the best of friends, which is so important in these programs, again, that parents are looking for support and kids are looking for friends. And there's just a lot of beautiful community happening and a lot of book joy and library joy going on, and I'm just so lucky to be working with these families and to throw myself in the mix every once in a while to do a sensory story time, or I've taught an ebook maker lab where we talked about taking pictures around the library and then creating a social story themselves so that the child can remember what the library is like and look back on the things that they did that day. We've also had something as fun as belly dancing, which is just really great. And we do use the visual symbols. We use Boardmaker to make a schedule across our wall so the kids can anticipate what's happening next. And one thing that if I could recommend one thing, whatever program you're doing for this age, in having conversations with our families, I realized that they weren't checking out books. I said, oh, you're not checking out books. Why is that? And they said, well, he'll break it or tear the book, even those books with laminated pages and Velcro. He'll just peel those stickers off. And I said, oh my gosh, well, we can't have that be a reason why your child isn't growing up with a variety of books, so I'll just give you books. So now everybody has to look out, because when the donations come in or things are withdrawn, I'm the first one to get my hands on those books. And at the end of every Club Wonder, we lay out the books and everybody gets to choose one to take it home. That includes siblings. And so it really just adds kind of something extra special, and we don't have to worry about what those spines get broken or anything like that. So that is Club Wonder.
And I know we definitely want to save time for questions, so we'll continue moving through our examples. Glen Ellen Public Library has been offering a Smart Starts program for a couple years now, and I think the beauty of it is that it really embodies this idea of universal design. It wasn't initially designed to be a program for kids with disabilities, but as you will hear, it's definitely inherently inclusive. It's a very flexible drop-in program where parents and caregivers can engage with their children at different stations around the room. There's a PowerPoint projected up on the window you can see or up on the wall. You can see in some of the pictures that provides tips for parents and direction in terms of how to engage with them in some of the various learning activity stations that we have. We always have a book station. And then, of course, the picture in the top right, one of the Smart Starts themes that we offered was the 5 senses. And I thought to myself, well, this is definitely inherently inclusive to everybody in terms of, being able to try out and practice our sense of smell. There are little cotton balls in each of those coffee cups that have lemon extract, vanilla extract, or garlic clove, and they have to smell the smell and match it with the image on the picture. So it's just a really wonderful program. Ages 3 to 8 drop in. We offer it for about an hour and a half, and parents can spend as much or as little time at each of the stations or in the program as they want. So it really is quite universal.
Okay, and we're moving on to programs for older children, and I just wanted to make a quick mention about Rainbow Therapy Time at Skokie. I know a lot of libraries have the Read to Rover programs going on, which is great for bringing anxiety level down in all people, especially children who are like first or third grade, just getting ready to read, or children with disabilities. Our Rainbow Therapy Time actually was based off of a program that Des Plaines Public Library was doing specifically for kids with autism. And we have opened it up to children of various abilities. Rainbow Animal Assisted Therapy volunteers, dog handlers, bring their dogs and a whole variety of tricks. And then we recruit and train volunteer aides to come and be one-on-one buddies with the children, who then go from dog to dog, practicing their social skills by taking turns, their verbal skills by giving commands to the dog, and their physical skills and even just little motor dexterity. But on the right, you'll see there's some animal bowling pins, and we practice setting those up, balancing those, naming the colors, naming the animals, and it's a bit of, it's very organic, it's not extremely structured, but it is a beautiful program, and the parents really appreciate how it's given their children more confidence. And what I'd really like to just ask you to do is go to our Snails blog, where we'll be posting a video. We'll also list it on the handout that we're going to send, but we have a video that interviews the parents, and you can just see how excited they are about the changes that this program has made in their children. And then we want to move over to Sylvia Kraft-Walker at Glenview Public Library, who has started like the wave of the future in special needs programming. Oh my gosh, we're so proud of her. So Friendship Club grew out of the summer Booking with a Buddy program, where younger children who are learning to read are partnered with an older child who is willing to listen to them and also read to them. And she realized that there were a lot of kids with special needs, and she wanted to provide more opportunities for them to come to the library to buddy up and to have shared experiences. So she now has 4th through 12th grade friendship ambassadors who have been trained by their local special education district. They have been trained in compassion and kindness, in leadership. They're receiving service hours for their time, but I really don't think that's what's keeping them coming back. They are partnered up with children in 3rd through 8th grade to have some social time before and after a program, which is sometimes led by a librarian or somebody, again, we talk about our partners and hopefully asking for discounts to have them to come in and present a program. They have had animal programs, live animal shows, scavenger hunts, adaptive karate, music therapy. This program lasts from 60 to 75 minutes, including the bookends of social time. They are sure to make sure to have a special education teacher in the room and 1 to 3 aides that they pay a small stipend. But we're just so proud of what's happening here. Truly inclusive. The numbers are big, so it's not a concern to administration. And also, the the numbers are big and the impact is huge, and they have thought through every step here with a fine-tooth comb, and Sylvia freely shares her information from the ideas to the training program. So we will have her contact info on our last handout as well. And then just really quick, we've been talking a lot about kids with developmental disabilities. I'm going to go back to thinking about those who may be deaf or blind. And we have had a few Braille Buddies programs. One of my favorites was when we had a student who knows Braille plan a lesson with his teacher to teach sighted children all about this funny raised dot business. So we spent some time learning about the 6 dots and their placement. We borrowed braillers from Chicago Lighthouse for the Blind, and then had some fun typing out the alphabet, our names, and coming together to play some bingo. We've also had book discussions, notably on Andrew Clement's Things Not Seen, whose secondary character happens to be blind, and also just an opportunity for like poetry slams or talent shows where people can come and we can make a specific invitation to join an inclusive program such as those. All right, it's time for our, oh, you know what, we'll skip the poll. We'll just do it this way. Do these games look familiar to you? I hope so. I bet they do. And they have something to do with our next group of students, which is our teens. So Renee, take it away.
This idea comes to us from the Batavia Public Library, which is so wonderful. So the Batavia Public Library has an inclusion game movie night program. It's offered for the idea behind it is social time and relaxation for teens and young adults of all abilities and their families and friends. The whole idea started because parents came to the library and initiated this idea. So I think, again, this is a great example of not only the library coming up with ideas, but sometimes our best ideas come from our community. This is an opportunity for middle school students through adults in their mid-20s to come to the library for a game night. There's also movies, and there are always special education professionals on site to assist if needed. And so I think here, you know, just a tip, contact your local organizations who work with people with special needs to see if they can maybe either volunteer their time to help out with a program or even help spread the word about a program and help you with marketing. I think this is a great idea of a program that has costs that's minimal. There's really easy setup. I mean, how many of us have these types of games? And also with the built-in marketing, you know, the parent initiated this idea, and oftentimes parents really connect with each other in organic different types of parent groups, so the parent can spread the word, you know, through word of mouth or buzz marketing to other families with kids that might be interested in this. And of course, built-in expertise as well with the special education professionals that are on site. So thank you, Batavia, for this great idea and example. And then I do want to highlight a little bit about what we can do to serve our schools. You know, sometimes families with kids with disabilities are not always able to make visits to the library. So you might be frustrated with low attendance at Sensory Storytime or some of your other programs for kids with disabilities or teens with disabilities, but that shouldn't stop you from going out and trying to serve and make an impact and make connections in a different, unique way. Sarah Ochner at the Vernon Area Public Library offers book-based mini lessons that is connected to school curriculum at the local special education district high school classes. And this is something we do in Glen Ellen as well. We really work with the teachers to come up with a lesson or content that ties in what they're trying to teach and bring home with the students. So definitely check out the Snails blog. Sarah has put together an awesome blog post with content, her full lesson plans, if you're interested in some ideas and inspiration for what to do for high school visits. And I think, Holly, I have you talking about this one.
Okay, so then we wanted to move into young adults being that 18 to 22 year because they're still in school. That's a transition period. And thinking about high school graduation rates and employment, I mean, we just want to be there for people, not just for education, but for, as you can see, as the kids get older, socialization is so important. So Schaumburg, again, identified a need based on their current programs for adults and saw that there were people interested in attending some adult programs that could use a little bit of accommodation, so they made the Next Gen programs for adults facing social challenges. These are programs, as you can see, for people who are able to attend independently. Their social opportunities. They meet monthly for about an hour and a half on a very minimal budget. They have lots of partners, such as the high school district and the local college and special education district. And they've, through making this impact on the community, have been invited to meetings within the community that serve adults with autism. At the Congresswoman's office, they've been asked to partner with mental health organizations on new initiatives, and this is really seen as an integral part of the community-wide initiative to better serve adults with ASD. So what I really love about this too is the libraries being seen as a partner in serving adults with disabilities. And then our Community Access Naperville is a group started by parents that brings older students together, and Barb Prescott at Naperville Public Library, and who is in administration, has the pleasure of planning an hour-and-a-half program once a month, and they always start with the Cat in the Hat welcoming them and dressed to match a theme. They've talked about the election, and then continue with a YouTube video and a little voting activity, and they've even done something that had to do with the Olympics, and their activity in the main library was passing the flashlight torch, and then they were asked to do something for the summer and learned about grilling with Play Food. And I'd love for you to see the pictures of this program. The picture here is actually not from the program, but I loved that there's something going on with the mayor and the One Book, One Community program that Community Access Naperville was involved in. So please do go to the Snails blog so that you can see Barb and a representative of Community Access Naperville talking about their programs. And then our last program we want to mention is an opportunity for you, especially if you're local. Next Chapter Book Club is designed for adults with developmental disabilities. They usually meet once a week in cafes or coffee shops, and there was one meeting at Elmhurst Public Library, but their volunteer coordinator wasn't able to continue. She was volunteering for Ups for Downs, an organization that supports people with Down syndrome, and so Elmhurst Public Library thought, well, we're not going to let this go, we're going to keep it going. So Kristen Sanderson is scheduling some affiliate training from Ohio State University, which is from where Next Chapter comes. And Skokie Library, my library, has also recently received a grant to provide training in March. And so we will be hopefully extending an invitation for you to join us in person to receive that training for free. And more information will be forthcoming. So do stay with us on our blog so you can catch that information. You can register on our blog by typing in your email address, and then you'll always get a notification. And as we said in the beginning, it's just things are better and we're stronger when we work together. So we're looking forward to Next Chapter Book Club spreading across the Chicagoland area.
And before we take time for questions, which we absolutely want to do, I just want to leave you with some final thoughts. Again, we really want to thank Rails for dedicating such a wonderful series of professional development opportunities on ADA 25. And really this year's theme the theme for ADA 25 was disability rights are civil rights. And I think both Holly and I agree, the spirit of public libraries is that they are institutions for all. And as librarians, we really should take it not only as an obligation, but a passion to serve all of our patrons. So we hope this webinar has challenged and inspired you to make your library communities more inclusive and more accessible to those with disabilities. And thank you so much for joining us today.
All right.
Oh, and this is our contact information. If you'd like to reach out to us, please do. In addition to the blog, we would love to hear from you. If there's anything that we can do to help, please let us know. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks so much, Renee and Holly. It was really informative and great to hear what's been going on at libraries in the area. My questions have been quiet. I have not received a single question from the audience. So you must have been very thorough, or everybody's just kind of soaking it all in and thinking about it. I've got maybe a question or two that I can ask while we wait to see if anyone will chime in now. When you took that poll, a lot of folks said they were just starting out. So do you have a suggestion on maybe, a a project or an idea for a program that somebody could try if it's their first time?
I guess I'll take this first and then I'll pass it off to Holly. I think before we even start with programming, I think the first step is training, and that's what everybody here today is here for. Whether it's disability awareness training, whether it's taking a class offered through Dominican University on serving people with disabilities. I know the ALSC blog has a myriad of posts as well as webcasts and webinars about serving people with disabilities, children and teens. I think it's important that we feel trained and confident before we move on and maybe assume what kind of program we want to do. I mean, we recommended community assessments. But even something like going to your local special education district, that's what I did when I first started out. I wanted to observe the local special education classes and see and learn what I could from the local special education teachers. And I picked up a lot about delivery in terms of how to effectively communicate with kids with disabilities, how to set up maybe a program based on how the classroom is set up. That's when I learned about visual supports. And they are going to be, special ed teachers in your area are going to be your biggest advocates and supporters. They will help you because they also see it so important to help their students. And they want to provide free recreational opportunities for their kids outside of the school environment. So I really think training is the first step, but I'll let Holly answer too.
Oh, I could not agree more. That's actually exactly what I was going to say. Even going to make the observations. And then I would say once you start connecting with those families, this really is about building relationships directly with the families. We don't want to rely on the school. So it's always in partnership, but we can't always be contacting people directly through the school. So once you start meeting your families, like for myself, I start creating an Excel spreadsheet of contact information so that I can email families directly. And just, yeah, really focusing on the relationship. And also not to forget that another way to serve is just to learn about the information in the area. In Illinois, this Illinois State Library is in the middle of an incredible initiative called Targeting Autism. And one of the things that we want to do is make sure that librarians are taking the time to get to know the resources for families and people affected by autism spectrum disorder, because we can't assume that if a child goes to a special education school or that they go for therapy, that they're suddenly aware of all the resources in the area. And so keep your librarian hat on and just be in the know so that you can share that information as you meet these families.
Okay, great. I did get a few more questions, and I know we're coming up at 11 o'clock. Do you have time to answer a few more questions?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So I'll just say I know it is 11 o'clock, and some people have their plans scheduled. We'll keep going, and we're recording. So if you need to come back and refer to the recording later, it will be on the Rails CE archives. So, okay, so let me get to some of these questions. Do you have any suggestions for computer programs for our library patrons who are disabled, or is there a resource that you can refer them to that has a list of programs?
I'll kind of take a stab at that, but I don't know if it'll be the kind of answer that we're hoping for. What we found at our library is with changing technologies, we don't have a CD-ROM collection anymore, and so we're really looking at online offerings. And I would definitely start with Zach Browser, because that's going to give you a number of websites. If you can download the Zach Browser for free, you're going to see a number of helpful websites, and then you can look through those and kind of cull the ones that you think you'd want to save as bookmarks or put on your desktop of your internet computers for kids to use.
Okay.
And we have, oh, I'm sorry, just to add, we have something on our Snails blog from Tamara Caldor. I know Holly mentioned her before. She has recommended a list of apps to use with kids with disabilities, and we highlighted that information in a post on our Snails blog. So that is all there as well.
Okay, thank you. This is probably maybe a little beyond your topic today, but the question is about library design and design of buildings. Do you know of any libraries that are a great example of how they're designing their buildings to serve our patrons with disabilities?
Hmm. In Chicagoland area. Um,
I think any in general, but if you know.
It's really interesting. There's a huge insurgence of libraries being redesigned right now, especially by one particular architect in the Chicagoland area. And library buildings are just, it's time, and so in terms of me thinking about spaces, I can't think of any, I mean, even my own example, one of the things that we tried to think about in redesigning our youth department is flexibility and open spacing, but knowing that sometimes families with kids with disabilities are looking for, those little corners of the library, or maybe even a quiet place if someone is experiencing sensory overload. So one of the options that we have in terms of communicating that to our members is offering our study rooms, offering our program room, and just letting them know that they are welcome in our space. I think the libraries that do it best are the ones that have a flexible design, and can, whether they're moving shelving, moving display units, sensory-friendly corners are fun. I see that a lot in facilities. So that could be something that you take into it. I know that I learn a lot about design in terms of library design from museums, and I take a lot of what they do. I know that some of the museums on the North Shore and even in DuPage County offer programs and days specifically for people and families with disabilities. So it's really interesting to see how museums will be flexible again with their space and change it up to be accommodating to all abilities.
Okay,
I
great.
can't think of any one. I can't
Okay.
think of any one. Holly, can you?
I cannot think of any one, but I did have a fascinating conversation with the director of the Algonquin Public Library, Stephen Barrow, who is thinking, wouldn't it be great if we actually had different levels of ADA certification like you do for environment, the LEED certification? So I think that he's maybe somebody to give a call to, because he's been thinking on this as they're going through a redesign process right now. And then some of the things, yeah, so I don't know of a particular
I, I
library.
do I do want to say, like, nationally, Brooklyn Public Library, the Child's Place, is a library specifically designed for kids with disabilities, for all people with disabilities. And our friend and mentor, Carrie Banks, is one of the librarians at that library. And they have sensory gardens. They have a lot of their space designed specifically for those unique needs in mind, because that's the mission of that library, of the Child's Place. So just Google Brooklyn Public Library, the Child's Place, and you'll find out a lot of information about what they do. They're amazing and so inspiring.
Okay, great. Thanks. So I have another question about somebody who would like to teach Braille. They have a student who would like to teach Braille, but they do not have a Braille machine. Do you have any suggestions for them on how to create materials?
Sure. Well, if you're okay, so I'm still always learning, always learning. There are some universities that have Braille embossers that may be willing to print materials for you. Our library has a Braille embosser, and we could probably help you out with that. There's also services that you can pay for, and I don't know the name of it now, but I can give you the name of somebody who can get you there. Polly Abbott at Second Descents in Chicago has been our consultant these last few months, and she's recommending that we point patrons to a service that's sort of a pay to print, and that they have a quick turnaround time for things that can be embossed. And then we partnered with the Chicago Lighthouse, which is both in Chicago and the north location in Glenview, and they just lent us braillers, which have a distant resemblance to a typewriter. Also, Rose Chenoweth at Illinois Talking Books, the Rails division, she has, and her partners may have resources as well. I know that they have handheld, I forget what they're called, but it's like a slide with a sharp object and you can punch the holes. Much more difficult, but it's what somebody would use when they've got to make a quick note. So hopefully that can help you get in touch with Braille printing,
Okay,
if you
great.
will.
What do you think about using eVites for marketing to families?
I have not used eVites, but since we're talking about social networking, if you will, or online tools, I have used meetup.com. And so I just want to throw that in real quick to say if you're looking for a parent group in your area, go to meetup.com, type in your zip code, and then do some keyword searches for special needs, disabilities, autism, and you may find some parent groups who are also willing to help market your events or reach out. Now, as far as eVite goes, that is something here at our libraries because we have centralized marketing that we don't use, but we have used Constant Contact, and that would make a pretty newsletter for an invitation. I think what's most effective is usually sometimes even a phone call just to remind people like that a program is coming up and we'd love to see you there. But the eVite I don't know, it's a new idea, something to consider.
I would add too, I think that I know we're all going digital, and even if we have registration online or if we have something like eVite out there, there is nothing compared to the impact that we can make person to person, one-on-one, face-to-face. Holly and I both have done a variety of outreach to the special needs community at local special education open houses. We have the NPN Developmental Differences Resource Fair coming up next March in 2016 in the Chicagoland area, where we can actually talk to people. And so it's then when we can make those connections, talk to them in person, and then follow up with a paper flyer. I mean, there are some people that just at the point of service when you're talking about something, that paper flyer will be able, or event guide or whatever, you know, is something to take. I will say too, with regards to registration for programs, you know, you can have registration for Sensory Storytime or your programs at your library, which is great. You want to get all of that information so you can create that distribution list. But knowing that for parents, it's important for them to know that if they don't show up, it's okay. I mean, there can be things that happen in the morning for a family with a child with disabilities, and that would inhibit them from being able to come to the library for the program. So it's important that we are flexible in understanding, and we continue to reach out and continue to inform and update without being overbearing or obnoxious, but still keeping that connection. But I feel like there's nothing compared to a one-on-one face-to-face interaction.
Okay, great. I have 3 more questions. Has anyone ever done anything with ECRTR and special needs? That's not a term I'm familiar with, so I'm hoping that one of you or
Is
both.
it every child ready to read?
That
Is
must
that what
be.
you're
That must be
referring
what
to?
that is. So have you done anything with that and special needs?
No, but not for me anyway. And that's only because when we're developing programs for kids with disabilities, I often have other thoughts and programs in mind. I think that it's a great template, and what I love about the second edition of Every Child Ready to Read is that it is inclusive in a way, but also not. I think there are some barriers in terms of just the development of it, writing, talking. These are things and skills that not every child with disability has in the same way. But I would be really interested in knowing what other libraries have done, but I personally have not done anything with that.
I have not either, although we may have something coming up. What we've done in our early literacy outreach is partner with local preschools. We found out what their needs were, and they said primarily they want to get books into the hands of kids, and that parent education was an important factor for them. And so we have been donating books to them in English and both world languages according to the makeup of their classroom, so that these books that are bilingual can be made into classroom lending libraries. And then our next step is to go towards that parent education. And so most likely it would be Every Child Ready to Read related, but I know at our special education district they already have something called Parent Academy where they meet maybe one Saturday a month and go over various topics. And some of them are general parenting, child development, and some are more specific to kids with disabilities. So we can follow up probably a few months from now, and we'll see how that goes and how we adapt it together.
And that's interesting too. I'm thinking about a quote that Barbara Clipper said during her presentation at Targeting Autism Forum earlier this year, and she was talking about the content of programs, and it's great if you can try and focus it on skills. In terms of, those types of skills, but really the true success of a program for kids with disabilities is the mere fact that you're doing a program. You are making those connections. You are welcoming families into the library. You are serving non-users at a library. Maybe they've never felt welcome at the library before. And that's a little more of the touchy-feely, unmeasurable outcomes that I think is not necessarily related to Every Child Ready to Read, but I think is really important to remember that it's not always about the skills we're teaching, although that's important too, but what she was saying was just, again, it's about the connections, it's about relationship building and welcoming all of our users in an accessible way.
Okay, great. The next question, I imagine we could probably have a whole workshop on just this, but I'll throw it out anyway. Do you have any tips on how to create social stories? Or do you have
Well,
resources
first,
to point people to?
yes. First, I would say autisminlibraries.org has a downloadable, customizable social story for This Is My Library. And then I would also want to highlight the second edition of the Social Story book. It actually was just published this year, and I pre-ordered it, and it came in. But what social stories can do, social stories can be utilized in a lot of different ways. Not only can you use social stories for introducing the visit of a library, but you can write a social story on the experience of checking out a book at your library or using the computer and the rules and guidelines for that use. So I believe we have that book listed on our resources page on our Snails blog. If not, I will update it, the Social Story book, second edition. And it has sample social stories. It has guidelines for how to write them. But the librariesandautism.org website has downloadable templates, and you just input your pictures in that format too. I will say that a tip for social stories, some people put them and create them on slideshows and videos where the user doesn't have the functionality to stop and spend time on each page as long as they want. I actually prefer like a PDF version, and then if you want to go the extra mile, printing it and binding it with that hard laminate plastic and putting it in your circulating collection and having a copy at your desk. So if people ever needed to use it in your library, they could do that. But those would be the two resources I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay, great. And I have two more questions, and I think we'll have to leave it at that. I apologize for keeping us late. So the next question is, and I know this has come up in some of our other works or webinars. How do you work with caregivers who bring patrons in who have a disability, and then the caregiver goes off to do something else? Do you have quick things that like programs that you can do, or and just tips, especially if you're short-staffed? How do you handle situations like that?
I would ask if that library has it depends on the age of the child. I mean, if your library has an unattended child policy and that child is under the age of 7 or 8 and your policy says they need to be with them, that's an opportunity just to reiterate the policy, regardless of if they have a disability or not. As children get older and even adults with developmental disabilities, there's much to be said for teaching independence, but I understand in a public setting, there are situations that can arise that would be potentially problematic or even unsafe, if the caregiver is not necessarily in range. Holly, do you want to address anything on that?
It's funny how often we think exactly alike.
Yeah.
The last questions you answered. No, I think you've hit it right, on the money. And the only other thing I was thinking is just, as you mentioned, independence. I was thinking about some of the young adults who have been in our library that I wouldn't say we had the most problem with, but we want to explain directly to the young adult what our policy is, and we would just remember to be firm, going back to not being so verbose, but being direct, that you are 21 years old and it is not appropriate for you to be here in the junior high department. These children are much younger than you. I'd like to walk you over to an area where you can make yourself at home. And if you do that a number of times and he keeps coming back, then it would be appropriate to contact the caregiver or parent. And the times that we've had those instances, I'll think of another one where somebody who was about 21 started making comments towards pretty girls, and we thought, okay, well, we understand that he's maybe not aware of what he's saying, but the law might not understand, and we don't want to see that go into a bad situation. So usually when you're calling the parents in these circumstances and letting them know it's for their safety and that you're here to help them make good choices and utilize the library in a safe and valuable way, they're going to support you and say, thank you so much for telling me, and I'll be sure to talk with him about it. And certainly if it's a caregiver, not a parent, and you're able to find out, if they're a caregiver visiting from a school, if you had to, you might want to call over there and say, I realize that, there's an aide coming, and oftentimes they're left on their own. Is there something that we can do to help, structure something for them or something like that? Just don't be afraid to be direct.
Louise, were there any other questions?
Oh, she's on mute now, I
Sorry,
see.
I muted myself because the phone was ringing. I apologize. Okay, so the
Oh, that's okay.
last question. This person says, it has been recommended to me to keep the programming materials for kids with special needs age appropriate and not necessarily developmentally appropriate. So for an example, if you have an 11-year-old child with a development age of 4, you wouldn't necessarily give him or her a toddler's toy. You would still give something that's for an 11-year-old. Is that your advice or your best practice when you're planning your special needs programming?
So in general, yes, but I would just jump out and say that the proof there with Batavia is that those games that we showed you, Candyland, Bozo Bucket, so on and so forth, like those were the attendees' favorite games, and that's what they enjoyed playing. And so I kind of think of similar sometimes to, well, if a kid really loves picture books or loves those paperback series, but it's more like brain candy. Do we just tell them to stop reading them? And I don't know, I would say no. We're librarians who read children's books. I think we want to be aware of it, be cognizant of it. And when we make a plan, it would not be appropriate, for example, to invite adults to a sensory story time with children. But if you have a group coming from a group home or an adult day center and you want to put together something like Sarah does at Vernon and use Stone Soup, but then make the activities more adult oriented. I think it's just all about kind of enjoying and accommodating. When it comes to toys, we have special education classes visit every other week or so, and we have both a collection of toys that are switch activated and battery operated, as well as some that we borrow from Lecotech and rotate those out on a monthly basis. And the fact of the matter is, some of them are really helpful for learning cause and effect, for practicing. A lot of the visits to the library are like occupational visits, right? So coming out into the community and then enjoying a story and working on whatever it is they're working on. For one of our little boys, his head tends to lean to the left. And so playing with a toy or reading a book is all about holding that book where the child can try to turn his eye gaze and hopefully his head towards center a little bit. So I realize that that's important. We don't want to make them feel like babies, but we want to respect their interests and what connects with them at the same time. So I don't think that there's a hard and fast rule.
Absolutely. Wouldn't change a thing.
All right, great. Well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. Again, thank you so much for staying a little bit longer and answering questions, and I really appreciate your time today.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. Thanks
Thank
everybody
you
for
for
being
having.
here.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Renee, you still there?
I am.
Okay, is Louise still there?
Let's see.